Hello and welcome back to Overbooked. I'm Amanda, and today we'll be reviewing the book Prairie Fires by Caroline Fraser. It only took me 2 months to read this book. It's a really long time. Like a lot of kids growing up, I read the Little House on the Prairie books. I had my mom's copies, so when she got them in like the 60s or 70s or something. So pretty old, but I really loved them. I loved the illustrations. I loved the stories. I loved these books. I loved Laura. And obviously you're reading them through rose-colored glasses when you're a child. You don't really question anything, and you don't have any background knowledge on what Laura Ingalls Wilder's life was actually like and what those pioneer days were. So I've always kind of been curious to know what her real story was, and I stumbled upon this book, Prairie Fires. I don't remember how I found it. It tells the true story, well, as much as the truth I think is we're gonna ever find out or know, of Laura Ingalls Wilder and her daughter Rose Wilder Lane, who was kind of nuts. So I really enjoyed this book. To start off, I would probably rate it, I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads just because I'm kind of picky sometimes, and I enjoyed it. I loved especially the beginning when we get to experience the Ingalls family and their journey. But after Laura gets married to Almanzo, I just kind of like lost interest, and that's kind of why it took me a long time to finish this book. And a lot of people might argue that's actually where a lot of the most interesting things happen, is because that's when, you know, Rose starts pushing her mom to write a book. But regardless, I enjoyed it, but I thought it was really hard to get through. So I think that if you're not used to reading nonfiction, or you're just not a fan of nonfiction or slow-moving books, I don't recommend it. But I do think that if you're interested in Laura Ingalls Wilder's story, if, you know, you're ready for the long haul, you're ready to, like, you know, dedicate some time, I think this book is for you then. So let's dive into some of the segments of the book. So she starts in the beginning, obviously, where, you know, she's kind of starts before Laura's time. So kind of in the beginning, you know, when Mom and Pa, Charles and Caroline were, you know, just getting together, and, you know, Charles has this huge vision of going out west and earning money off the land. We get that whole story of them traveling into the big woods, Wisconsin, to Minnesota, to eventually to DeSmet, where, and the entire journey, there's a lot of failures, there's a lot of hardship, and a lot of suffering. I think you kind of get a little idea of how hard it is on the prairie with the Little House on the Prairie books, but this shit was hard. Obviously, Laura and her daughter, super rose-colored glasses, the story, like, glazed over it. There was a ton of shit that happened that, you know, a lot of time. So when I was reading it, you know, she talks about how, especially the book, The Hard Winter, where it's just like this awful winter where a lot of people are just like starving, there's no food, there's not a lot of heat. And she says that, you know, hymns and, you know, singing and storytelling is what got us through those hard times. But sometimes even those things just can't even brighten the mood. It's just a long, hard suffering. I'm from South Dakota. I'm from the prairie, the torn up prairie that Laura's not a super big fan of, which we find out. But, you know, I don't know any suffering. I didn't plow the land. My father didn't plow our land, and we have stores. I'm from a fairly large city there. So, but I do understand kind of what she's saying. Like, there's just nothing that you can really do. The weather is unpredictable in the Midwest. It's just terrible. I can't even imagine what it would have been like in a winter blizzard and not having, you know, a heating system installed, not being able to just go on down to Hy-Vee to pick up some groceries before the storm hit. So it's just kind of crazy because I kind of know what she's going through, but I have no idea. Like, I can't understand the harsh conditions that she had to endure all of it. Another thing that I really liked about the beginning and the end, because she reflects in the end of the book, she's writing the Little House books, but is just her love for the prairie, her love for South Dakota, her love for this untouched land. I totally agree. I think, and I may be biased, but I think the South Dakota skies are the bluest skies I've ever seen in my life. I totally agree with her, but it kind of leads me to my next point, is where Laura, I think, is constantly contradicting herself. You know, she loves this untouched prairie. She loves the wilderness. She loves seeing all of it. But then at the end of her life, she travels back and she's so mad. Like, all these places are torn up, you know, the fields are plowed, there's towns popping up, you know, the prairie is touched and it's almost like tarnished in her mind. And it's not as beautiful as what she remembered. But that's what her, you know, that's what her family sought out to do. Like, that's what they went west for, was to start a life. And in order to start a life, you need to build a community. It's one of her faults is that she doesn't really grasp what she's getting upset about, I don't think, because she gets upset about a lot of things. Her actions say a different thing. The beginning of the book, we talk about her life with her mom and pa, and like the second half, I would say like the middle part, is her life with Almanzo, and just how much more struggle that was. So the Little House on the Prairie books end, I think, with, what is it, like these happy golden years or something, and it's like the first year of their marriage or something. She wanted to, like, she says explicitly that she doesn't want to write anything after that because there's nothing happy after that. There's, you know, her and Almanzo's marriage was super hard, super tough. They faced a ton of disasters. Almanzo was terrible with money. You know, Laura is just out here trying to survive, essentially. You know, their house burns down, their crop fails over and over again. They move down to Florida. That doesn't work out. They move back to, I think they go back to South Dakota briefly, and then they end up in the Ozarks. It's just a hot mess. I'm like, girl. And then this is the time where obviously Rose is introduced, Rose Wilder Lane. This girl is a fucking psychopath, you guys. I hate her. I don't super appreciate Rose. I didn't really know anything about Rose before reading this book. I just kind of always imagined her as like this little girl from the book, because I think the oldest she gets is like 3 or 5 or something. I don't really know. I think 3 would make sense because it's just the first 3 years of their marriage in that last book. But she is psycho. Grows up, so they get to the Ozarks, you know, whatever. Rose is like this black sheep of the family. She's rebellious. She doesn't give a shit. She is terrible with money. She doesn't want to listen to her mom or her dad. There's a lot of tension between her and her mom. And eventually Rose moves out to like California. She marries this guy. It's a terrible marriage, which ultimately ends up in divorce. Out here, since she's like single pretty much, she figures out how to make a living, and she finally finds writing. She does biographies of famous people that are super inaccurate, and these famous people come after her, and she isn't apologetic at all. She's just like, it's my interpretation of you, like, deal with it. That's essentially what she does, and she's just like, fuck it, like, whatever. Then she's telling her mom, like, her mom's like, oh, like, I think I would want to start writing, maybe I would want to write a children's book. And Rose is like, that's stupid, there's no money in children's book. Well, you know, we have the Little House on the fucking Prairie, Rose, so this is just gonna be a big rant session, essentially, because once Rose is introduced, I am just pissed, because, you know, eventually Rose, like, convinces her mom to start writing these books. Laura is at home doing her shit. She's trying to do her best, trying to get money. Rose is, like, spending money like it's running out of business, and it's like she's everywhere, she's nowhere. And then she goes to Europe, which is the most random part of this her whole life, I think, is that she just goes to Europe, she travels around, and then she falls in love with the country Albania, and then she wants to live there. She wants to adopt a child there. She never has a child, so she's always just like trying to adapt these people that she meets, and she's very just off the wall. Like, she doesn't maintain these relationships that she wants to establish, so it's tough to like follow along with her. She's also she goes through bouts of depression. obviously this is like the early 1900s, so I don't think there's a lot of research on how to deal with mental illness. You know, she doesn't really take care of herself very well. It's just tough to watch. That's kind of like that's like the middle of the book, is like just watching Rose do this crazy shit with her life, and then like her parents trying to pick up the pieces. And you also get a lot of like information on how Rose feels responsible for her parents and feels that she needs to support them, which is very weird to me and very confusing. Rose decides that she wants to give her parents like a yearly allowance, essentially, of $500. She's just gonna pay them that. But she can barely afford to pay them that. The author is like, yeah, there's no records of Laura and Almanzo asking their daughter to help them out financially. There's no reason why she's like, yeah, I'm gonna pay you guys $500 every year because I just want to. A lot of it, the author she like gives these examples, and she kind of elaborates how, you know, Laura, Almanzo, and Rose, you know, were living a life in extreme poverty, like extreme. Some people react differently to poverty. Laura obviously became super frugal. She found ways to make use of everything and found creative ways to make an income. Rose, on the other hand, I think had the other end of people who experience poverty, and as soon as they get money, want to blow it. They just want to spend it because they don't know. They grew up not having it, so they want it to use. You know, she's just kind of like out here spending any buck she can, and she thinks that she needs to help her parents since they went through this extreme poverty together. But, you know, her parents are like, I mean, cool, thanks for the $500, but like you don't need to pay us this. Like, we'll take it, obviously, but like no one's gonna turn down $500. Also, we're not asking for it. If you like, and then I think there were some letters that she quoted, like she writes verbatim the letters, and it's like, thanks for, because she would send them in installments, and she's like, thanks for the $200 check. You know, we're doing fine. I know that you're kind of struggling. Do you want it back? And it's just kind of like weird. So there's no indication that her parents need this money. But I'm going down a rabbit hole. So that's kind of like the middle of the book, is like just Rose like just balling out, going crazy. And her parents are just like, wow, this kind of sucks that we have to deal with this. And then the third part of the book is essentially, you know, the making and creating of the books and then the end of their lives. So what I was surprised to know and find out, and I didn't really know this prior to checking out this book, was that, you know, Rose Wilder Lane did a lot of ghostwriting for her mom. You know, Laura would, you know, write out these books and then send them to her daughter to edit, and her daughter did a lot of like just major editing and rewriting herself of these stories, and a lot of it was very fictional. You know, Laura understandably couldn't deal with a lot of the emotions that she experienced on this journey of hers. You know, her sister goes blind, they suffer like extreme poverty as a child. You know, they go through a lot of hard shit, and writing these, she's like, it takes her back to all of these hard times, and she has to kind of like face these emotions, and she can't really. She kind of is very blunt in her writing at some points because she just can't handle it, and her daughter kind of takes over for her. You know, it's kind of hard to watch because her daughter's not like nice about it either. She's not like, you know, I'm really sorry you had to deal with your sister and her blindness, and you had to, you know, not go after your dreams because you had to work for your sister to go to college, and you know, that sucks, but get to fucking work. Essentially, she was just like cracking the whip at her mom, like, write these books. And then the whole thing about whether they were true or fiction, and Laura and Rose, the like dying day, were like, yeah, a lot of this stuff in here, everything is true. Nothing like, I mean, yeah, I think the concepts are true. A lot of the stories are probably true, but, you know, a lot of the actual facts in there are not true. You know, a lot of this comes out after Laura, well, it starts kind of at the end of Laura's life and then goes after, you know, she passes away. Is like, you know, we looked into the census. Laura was actually 3 when the first book takes place, and in the story she's 5. You know, like, just a lot of discrepancies that don't match up. A lot of things that happen that they just kind of place there. It's brought up a lot where there's like this serial killer that's on the Pioneer, like on the prairie. They were at a house and it was like an inn, and people would go by and they would go to eat, and they had this whole scheme. Laura and Rose kept trying to put the Ingalls at that house. Like, they kept trying to be like, yeah, and Charles, like, Pa, like, went by and he narrowly escaped. And they kept trying to keep making all these stories about it. In reality, they never crossed this house. They may have seen it, probably not. It was like, they were in the vicinity within like a 50-mile radius of this house, but nothing ever came of it. And it's just kind of like, yeah, like, should we put it in there? Yeah, we should. It's good for the story. And I think at the end, I think that they kind of believed it themselves. You know, it's like you tell yourself a lie so many times and then you think it's true. So that just kind of happened over and over again. And, you know, Laura goes on to receive a lot of acclaim for these books. And it's just kind of tough to read because there's a lot of passages in the book that are pretty racist, pretty, you know, like regarding Native Americans especially. There's a scene where she has to like take out essentially because her dad and some of his friends put on dark, you know, blackface. And it's just kind of like, okay, you know, and it's like, this did not age well. And that kind of goes back to like her contradicting herself. She, you know, at one point would say, you know, she enjoyed Native Americans, they really knew how to take care of the land. And then in their book, she wouldn't even regard them as people. So it's just kind of like this huge contradiction, which I feel like Laura her whole life was full of them. She pretty much essentially ran her house. Like, she was in charge. Almanzo, I don't think, had any say what happened in their life after a certain point. And she joined a ton of clubs. Like, she was the president of a lot of women's clubs, just random clubs in her hometown. And, you know, really thought that there should be a lot more rights for, you know, women on the farm. And then when women got the right to vote, she was like, yeah, no, I don't think that's good at all. Like, I think that's giving too much power to females. When, you know, she was already kind of being a boss. She was running a home. She was handling their finances. She was, you know, she was essentially bringing home a lot of the bacon and making sure whatever money they had was being used effectively. And it just kind of was weird how her actions said that she was like, had feminist ideals, but her words were like, no, I'm not. She super criticized FDR's New Deal programs and all of his government aids, when in fact, she also accepted government aid. She worked for a government office that did, you know, farm loan programs that gave, you know, reduced interest loans to farmers. You know, that's government aid. Her father took advantage of the Homestead Act. She was always saying, like, you have to work for what you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But, you know, a lot of times her family was taking advantage of government issued like aid to people or taking things that weren't theirs. At some point, her parents and her family settle on a land that they did not pay for at all, and then they just kind of peace out like after like 2 years. It's kind of like nuts how she thinks that these people accepting government aid are just, you know, weak and they don't deserve it, and FDR is a communist. But her whole life, her and her family have accepted aid. You know, in the end, Laura obviously passes away. All of her rights go to Lane, Rose. Rose is just fucking crazy, so she kind of like blunders everything. She, you know, doesn't have any children, and at this point she's gone through 1 million adopted sons, and now she has an adopted grandson. And once she passes away, she leaves all of the rights to him, when in fact Laura, before she passes away, she's like, I want all the rights of these books and whatever to go to my daughter. And then after my daughter passes away, I want them to go to the library where her home in Ozarks was. So that main branch library, I want them to have the rights to my books, whatever. Yeah, that doesn't fucking happen because Rose is crazy. So after she passes away, she gives all the rights to her adopted grandson, who is a super conservative, crazy guy. And he essentially is the one. And because of him, we have the Laura Ingalls Wilder, like, or Little House on the Prairie show, that I've never honestly really watched it. When she describes it, it sounds like that was even just further from the truth than the books were. And after they ran out of material, they just like made shit up, which is like fine, I guess, but because it's TV, I don't know. I think it would have been interesting to see what Laura would have thought of this TV show if she was still alive. I don't think she would have enjoyed it at all. You know, this guy, her adopted grandson, I think his name was like MacArthur or something, eventually dies. And then, you know, I think that's Mansfield, Missouri. They try to get the rights back. And I don't really know exactly how it ends up, but like the rights are still with the MacArthur, like, estate somehow. And it's just crazy. Like, Rose must have put some serious words in her will or something, because that's nuts. In the end, we kind of like, we see Laura grow, essentially. We see her grow up, her real life. And I think that as much as I think that Laura, like looking back, I enjoyed those Little House books. I think they were fun. Will I have my kid read them? I don't know. Maybe when I read them, we'll point out some things like, you know, what is happening here where like the Native Americans are just essentially marched off their land isn't right. Like, we shouldn't have just believed that Manifest Destiny was a good thing. Maybe point out some problems with the book while I'm reading them to my kids. I don't know. Or maybe I'll just give up and find a new book to read to my kids. I don't really know. I think her life is fascinating because it's the life of every pioneer back then. You know, there's a reason why there's no one living in the Midwest. It was hard. It's hard to live there today. It's so hilarious to me to look back and read how all these people thought that like the Midwest was like the perfect place to live, and you know, this land of opportunity and Manifest Destiny, and how, you know, it was our land, God-given land. And it's just like, it's kind of funny because it was fucking karma. You know, you push people off their land and then you try to make money off of it, and almost no one did. Like, not a lot of people succeeded. I don't have exact numbers, but I know a lot of people who moved out eventually just moved back east. Like, farming on the Midwest is tough. You know, my grandpa owns a farm. A lot of my family owns farms. There's no way you can farm by yourself. There's no small farmers anymore. It's impossible. You know, it's nuts. And I feel like after that first winter, you know, coming across the Midwest, you would just want to get the fuck out. Because I feel like that every winter. I'm like, why do I still live here? Who knows? In the end, I think that, you know, Laura and her daughter had a ton of issues, that the books are very, very loosely based on truth, I think. And I think Laura had I think Rose had a lot of influence on her mom. A lot of the suggestions she made is that Laura didn't even like, eventually got made. Again, I recommend this book if you're interested in this life, if you're interested in Laura Ingalls Wilder. You know, I think it was really good. I think it was interesting. I do, like, again, it was very slow moving. It's very dry. I do like how the author included some pictures of the family. We get to see, you know, the sisters. We get to see Rose. I think if you're not a fan of nonfiction and you don't give a shit about Laura, then don't read a book. Just don't read it. Even if you are like, yeah, I think I like Laura Ingalls Wilder, I think that'd be cool, and you're like, do I have time for a 500-page book? Do I really like nonfiction? Don't read it. But if you're in a small category like me, who is like, who is this woman? Pick it up and check it out. Prairie Fires by Caroline Fraser. I would give 3 or 4 stars. I really need to return this to the library because, you know, I don't know how many people are waiting for this book, but I've had it since July. That's it for today. This is a really long, probably really dry video because for a really dry book. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was interesting to you. And if you're interested in Laura Ingalls Wilder and have questions, you know, put them in the comments below. If you just want to have you're like, I wonder what this happened, and you just don't feel like reading the book, just ask me and I can answer it for you. let me know with your, if you read the Little House on the Prairie books, what your thoughts are on them now, and just kind of any thoughts on Laura Ingalls Wilder. I'm interested. Put them in the comments below. Make sure to like this video and make sure you subscribe. I'm trying to put videos out every week, and I will see you guys next time.